Hey, Pretty Girl Club. Welcome back to the Decentering Men series. And it's been a while since I've addressed any critiques on this channel. I've been busy with a lot of other content, but every once in a while I like to come on here and talk about what people are saying in these pretty girl streets. And one talking point that I heard against the exotical space is that decentering men is impossible because it is a philosophy. It's not realistic. Some people were saying that the decentering men content it's very similar to Black Lives Matter. Remember how during Black Lives Matter they were making money off of the talking points, but then they were using the money to go live in these white neighborhoods? So there are people who are saying that decentering men is impossible because men are the ones who built the buildings that we're living in. Men are the ones who built the infrastructure that we use. They created a lot of the inventions that we use every day. So the argument from a lot of male content creators is that it is impossible to decenter men. Well, the first thing I have to say to that is that those people who are saying that, they're actually conflating decentering men with separatism. So separatism is actually different than decentering men. All decentering men is this chart right here. Okay, so I've shown this chart on pretty much every single one of my decentering men videos. What I'm talking about is getting rid of codependent behaviors. I'm talking about not centering your happiness around men, not centering your identity around men. That's different than female separatism, which is basically where you're trying to say that, women should just live in all women's communes and that you shouldn't utilize any inventions created by men, or that men are essentially worthless to society. That's actually not the argument that we're making over here on this channel. So do you see how a lot of men conflate you not dating them or you being celibate with suddenly they're worthless? Isn't that interesting? So that's mistake number one, is conflating decentering men with separatism. And also, I've talked about this before, decentering men actually exists on a spectrum. So I believe that hypergamy is a form of decentering men because you have to eliminate about 90% of men out of your dating pool. So you've already decentered, or you refuse to date about 90 to 95% of men in your entire country. That is definitely a form of decentering men, and it goes all the way to separatism. I would say separatism is more so at the end of the spectrum. So there are some content creators who promote separating yourself from men and decentering them from your sexuality as a whole, which would mean going more towards lesbianism or going more towards celibacy, spending a lifetime being celibate or spending a lifetime being asexual. My channel does not promote just one way to decenter men, okay? Because decentering men is a multifaceted, nuanced experience, just like anything else. So I think that a lot of men, they're afraid of being alone. I think a lot of men are afraid of not being around women or not having access to women. And so they see content where I talk about not centering them, and then they get all scared. They're like, you can't decenter men. That's impossible because we built the buildings that you live in. Okay, we're not saying that we can't live in buildings because men built the buildings. Decentering men is not about hating men. It's not about hating the contributions that they've given to society. Obviously, we know that men make great employees. They do a good job building buildings. They fix our cars. But that's not what this is about. And another person called the exotical space a gynocracy. So the definition of gynocracy is women having political superiority to men. But anybody who actually watches this channel knows that my channel has really nothing to do with politics. This is not a political channel at all. I don't tell women on here who to vote for or what to vote for. I don't really talk about politics at all. If anything, I talk about identity politics, and that's about it. But the whole point of us talking about not centering our lives around men, it's to get out of these codependent behaviors. Because if you look at a lot of the women who have kind of this pick-me behavior or these 50-50 behaviors, a lot of those women are very codependent, whether it's emotionally codependent. Some women are very financially codependent. Some women will, maybe they are trying to have a baby by a man because they think it'll make him stay. So my whole talking point about decentering men, it's about helping women to get out of the cycles of abuse. That is my entire agenda with my decentering men talking point. It's not about saying men as a whole are just worthless or whatever. But another talking point that I got about the decentering men content is that the division amongst Black women and mixed race women wouldn't exist if it were not for men. It's male centered. And I actually agree with that. But what the men don't understand is that it's the women who can't get the men who get mad at the women who can. So it's the women who don't have the pretty privilege who get mad at the women who do have the privilege. It's the women who feel like they're picked last or they're the least desirable or last to be married who get mad at the women who get picked first or the women who are the preferences. So that's the only reason that we even talk about this. It's not because we're arguing back and forth over who gets to have the man, because here on this channel, we do not view men as some sort of ultimate prize to be won, because viewing a man as a prize, that's actually a form of objectification. So all of this talk, a lot of women, they do so much talking about how they don't want to be objectified, yet they objectify men by making men the prize. So this channel does not view men as some sort of trophy to be won. But for a woman who does not have any access to men, or a woman that's been validation starved by men, or especially in terms of Black women who also have a lot of daddy issues or, absent fathers and things like that, a lot of Black women's trauma actually comes from Black men. And so, unfortunately, the Exoticals have been kind of like this casualty of the gender war between Black men and Black women. So, yes, we are going to be talking about men because the way that Black men interact with Black women, it affects how we are treated. Okay, so that's not being male-centered. That's just me giving context to what I'm talking about. But also, just because somebody mentions men, it doesn't mean that they're centering you in the entire conversation. Another talking point about the Exoticals is that decentering men is like MGTOW for women. So MGTOW is men going their own way. And, that's actually not far off, because when I started this channel, I had a hashtag called EggTOW, like Exoticals going their own way. So if you look up the definition of MGTOW, it's really just men who choose to focus on self-improvement, financial independence, and pursuing hobbies and interests that fulfill them personally. So if you're calling this the female version of MGTOW, like this is WGTOW or whatever, I actually don't have a problem with that, because I really do wish that more women would go their own way in life and stop being followers. So if that's how you define us, I don't have a problem with that at all, because I'd rather be defined as being WGTOW than somebody who's just desperate and trying to ride the coattails of a man and making all of this limerence femcel content about how if you just swirl or just divest or just learn how to assimilate into white spaces, then suddenly this Italian Fabio will just come and sweep you off your feet. Like, I'd rather be called WGTOW than make that kind of content. That's just incredibly unrealistic. So that's another reason that I prefer to make decentering men content. It's because a lot of the content that people make in Black female spaces that even mention men are extremely unrealistic. And then they're talking about this whole vetting thing. First of all, there is no perfect way to vet. There's no such thing as, oh, if you just vet a guy for these 10 things, then you're just going to live happily ever after and have a perfect relationship. That is false. And so the whole purpose of this channel is to try to help women to get their priorities straight, because a lot of the content that they're watching online, because those women didn't have father figures, and because those women are also femcels who have limited interactions with men, their content is very far off. Not to mention the fact that a lot of those women are also monocultural, so even their content about white men or about Hispanic men, even that content is off, because they've never even been in those communities. They're not adjacent to those communities. They have no family members from those communities. Another talking point that I heard about the Exoticals is that most women won't be able to decenter men because decentering men requires too much strength. So I believe that. I agree with that. But this is also why I acknowledge the fact that decentering men exists on a spectrum. Okay, so there will always be 50-50 women. There will always be pick-me's. There will always be women with no standards. But if I can use my voice to help women to get out of these cycles of trauma, I'm going to utilize it in that way. And I do agree that decentering men requires sexual discipline in particular, and it requires emotional discipline. So only the women who don't have sexual or emotional discipline, those are the only women who are really just going to struggle with decentering men. And I'm not going to call out any specific cultures or ethnicities who struggle with emotional and sexual discipline, but yeah, those are really the only women who decentering men would be hard for. If you have no emotional discipline, yeah, it's going to be hard to decenter men. If you have no sexual discipline, yes, it'll be hard to decenter men. If you've got daddy issues and you're validation starved, yes, it's going to be hard to decenter men. But those are really the only three groups that I can think of where it's so difficult to decenter men. I mean, not making another human being the center of your life, first of all, that's healthy, because codependency is this mindset of you have to change and then I can be happy. I'll be happy once he changes. I'll be happy once he grows up. I'll be happy once he finally matures and treats me right. That's actually codependency. So the only women who have an extremely hard time decentering men are the codependent women. This channel is not geared towards, nor does it promote codependency in any way. In fact, I call out codependency on this channel all the time because I feel like a lot of poor women struggle, obviously, with codependency. They're codependent on rich white men, or they're hoping that some rich white male savior will come and save her from her financial woes. And another talking point that I heard about this space is that decentering men is like practicing eugenics. So I'm not sure what they mean by that, but this channel does not say to unalive male babies or anything like that. So I'm not sure how they're trying to say that it's practicing eugenics. And then another thing that people say is like, oh, well, men and women, men aren't going anywhere basically. So you can't decenter them. And it's like, you don't understand nuance because once again, decentering men is different from separatism. Separatism is like, okay, I don't want to talk to men. I don't want to interact with them. I don't want any infrastructure built by them. I'm not going to utilize their resources. No, you can still utilize men's resources. In fact, I promote that. I promote utilizing men's resources because we live in a capitalistic society. So you really have no choice but to utilize other people's resources to your advantage, and that includes men's. The whole concept of decentering men is really just about keeping that same energy. Like, okay, he's benefiting off of you. You need to be benefiting off of him. He's using your resources as a woman. Make sure you are using his resources as a man. Decentering men is about deprioritizing a man's thoughts, feelings, beliefs, or like what he thinks you should do. Because for a lot of women, they will let men get away with certain things and they wouldn't let a woman get away with those same things. Like, think about how quickly women will end friendships with other women. Women will stop being friends with another woman because she looked at her funny. But then when it comes to women's interactions with men, a lot of women will let men slide on so many different things. So they hold women to a higher standard than what they hold men to. So decentering men is about no longer putting men on this pedestal above women and no longer giving them the benefit of the doubt above women due to their gender. It's about getting rid of that gender bias that a lot of women have. And then another talking point that people gave against the exotical space is like, do you really think all women are going to decenter men? Of course not. The goal of this channel and the goal of me making this content, it's not to try to influence all women to behave a certain way. That is statistically impossible. And so why are you threatened? That's my question. For the men who are so threatened by my content, why are you threatened by me creating decentering men content, especially if you know that all women aren't going to decenter men anyway? So your fear is not women decentering men. Your fear is just that you won't get the woman you want. Because like I said, a lot of men's talking points about you dying alone, that's really just a projection. So it's like, no, you sound like you just fear dying alone, and you sound like you're upset because the women that you actually want, which are the confident, pretty women who really don't need the validation, they don't need this constant male presence in their lives. They're not prioritizing marriage above all else, or, like getting depressed if they don't get married by age 30. So a lot of men who are attracted to these carefree, confident women who have more time to do their self-care, they have more time to beautify themselves or whatever. It sounds like they're just upset that the women that they want, which is us, the Exoticals, that we are choosing to not prioritize them as much as they would like. And it's like, why do men do this? Why don't you just go for the women who are already begging to be with you? Just go for the pick-me's, dude. Go for the 50-50 women. Go to the church. Do you know how many pick-me's there are in the church? Go to your local church and get yourself a nice trad wife and call it a day. Also, what happened to the passport bro movement? I thought that you guys didn't like modern American women, which is really what this channel has a lot of. We've got a lot of American women on this channel, lots of westernized women. So I thought that you guys didn't even like Western women anyway. For all these, I don't know if these are red pill guys saying these talking points about exoticals. I don't know what sector they're from, but it's like, if you guys don't even like American women, you shouldn't care about us decentering you, right? And then another talking point that I heard is that by decentering men, we are decentering the possibility of an easier life, because we're not like begging for marriage over here. We're not doing everything in our power to get picked by a man. And it's like, since when does having a man equate to an easier life? Because the last time I checked the actual statistics, divorce rates are high, femicide rates are obviously high. Women getting SA'd, that happens in relationships, it happens in marriages. So getting with a man, it doesn't guarantee an easier life. And in a lot of cases, if you get an easier life financially with a man, you're going to get a more difficult life emotionally, because most men in general do not even have the emotional intelligence to have a peaceful relationship with a woman for the next 80 years. The average man walking down the street is not even mentally healthy. So equating a relationship to automatically having an easier life, that's a false equivalency. That's not actually true, because if it were true, then divorce rates wouldn't be so high. Boyfriends and girlfriends breaking up, that wouldn't exist, right? Because you'd automatically have an easier life by just having a man in your life. So, I mean, that talking point is a moot point. Like, oh, by decentering men, you're not going to have a soft life. No, if anything, you're going to have a softer life while not prioritizing men, because there are multiple articles that talk about how unmarried child-free women are actually the happiest subgroup in the world. So I actually have articles and statistics to back up what I'm talking about. And then another talking point against the exotical space is like, if you decenter men, then you're no longer going to be protected. And it's like, women have so many different protection mechanisms that they can use other than a romantic relationship with a man. Because like I said, romantic, that's not the only way that you can interact with a man, okay? So this decentering men talking point, it's about not prioritizing these long-term, lifelong monogamous 50-50 marriages with men. So there are so many other ways that a woman can interact with a man that has nothing to do with a marriage. Like, if a woman truly wants to protect herself, she can get a weapon. She can hire somebody as an employee to protect her if necessary. She can lock her door. She can move to a better area or a gated community. And also, this whole protection talking point, who are you protecting us from? Because most of the time when a man says he's protecting you, he's really protecting you from another man. So it's like, men are the threat. So men are protecting us from other men. Men are protecting us from their own counterparts. So this whole argument about if you have a man, you're going to be more protected, that's the same as saying if you date a gangster, you're going to be more protected from gangsters. Am I? Are you sure about that? And then another talking point that people gave against the exoticals is like, men represent protection and provision. You guys already know my opinion on this. I do not believe that men are the natural protectors and providers, and that men are just better at doing that. No, they're not. Women, statistically, are better at being protectors and providers. Women tend to protect and provide for their children more than men do. A lot of women know how to protect each other emotionally. A lot of men are not going to protect your emotions, ladies. Okay, and we know this because in a lot of cases, men, first of all, they're about 16 times more likely to go to jail. Okay, so you're telling me that a gender that is more likely to commit violence, a gender that's more likely to go to jail, and a gender that's generally highly likely to be emotionally abusive, you expect me to believe that that same gender is the natural protector and provider? No, that's just an old traditional misogynistic talking point in favor of men. That's all that is. So it's like, if you truly think that men are just better protectors and providers and that they are statistically more likely to protect and provide than women, then tell me and show me the articles to back that up. Because I would love to see those articles. Like, a lot of men have so many talking points against the exotical space, but they have nothing to actually back it up. No screenshots, no articles, no statistics. Where are the statistics on men being the best protectors and providers? Because child support wouldn't even exist if it weren't for men who just wanted to go around and impregnate as many women as possible and then abandon them. Like, there are literally laws that got put into place because of men's bad behavior and because of men's lack of protection and lack of provision. Prisons were created. The prison system was created due to men's behaviors. But I'm supposed to believe that men are just these knights in shining armor and, they're all protectors and providers. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it can't exist, but I am saying that it's certainly not the majority. Because if it was, divorce statistics wouldn't be what they are, breakups wouldn't be what they are, feminism wouldn't exist because it wouldn't have to exist, right? Because everybody would be protected and provided for. Even if you look at the way that men run countries, look at all of the countries in this world that have a male president or a male that is running the country. A lot of the countries in existence throughout history have had wars. They've been dominated by other countries or trying to go in and dominate other countries and steal from them and stuff. So a lot of that behavior was started by men and perpetuated by men. Going into wars, invading other countries, R-wording the women of those countries, enslaving the women of those countries, enslaving the other men of those countries. So a lot of men historically have had a tendency to dominate and subjugate as many people as possible, or to dominate and subjugate those who are in close proximity to them. And this tends to be the case in a lot of marriages as well. Generally speaking, the more access a man has to you, the more disrespectful he will become. I mean, this is just a pattern that anybody can notice just by having two eyes. So saying that decentering men means that I'll never be protected or provided for, that's a laughable talking point. And then another talking point against the exotical space is that without men, we can't procreate. Okay, well, last time I checked, a woman's purpose in life is not just to have children. Okay, so women have the freedom of choice. So some women want children, some women don't. I happen to be a woman who is child-free, and this channel has a lot of women on it who don't have children, or maybe they already had kids and they don't want any more. So making it like it's a punishment to not have children, that's also laughable, because who wants to be a married single mother? Let's talk about that, because a lot of women, they will talk shit about single mothers, like women who are not in relationships, and it's like those same women are married single mothers. So most of the time, you're either going to be a married single mother, or you're going to be a single mother, or you're going to be a single mother with a boyfriend. So generally speaking, you're going to be a single mother regardless, whether there is a man in the house or not. So telling us that like we're not going to have kids as if that's something bad, that is that almost sounds like some sort of misogynistic talking point as well, where it's like, oh, well, you're not a real woman if you don't have children. And again, if we are not real women, or if we are like not feminine enough, then why would you care about us decentering you? I mean, because you don't want us anyway, right? So then it doesn't matter if we decenter you. Why don't you go to the women who are the trad wives? Why don't you go pick them? And another talking point that I heard is that if women actually could decenter men, then we would be in charge, and we're not. We're being subjugated by men, so this is proof that we failed at decentering them. And my response to that is that women tend to have different intentions than men. Okay, the average woman doesn't want to be a world dictator. The average woman doesn't really have a desire to go in and dominate and subjugate other countries and start wars with other countries and try to come in and destroy their infrastructure. So saying things like, oh, women would be winning. Okay, well, describe winning. What do you mean by winning? You mean dominating and subjugating other people? So do you see the mindset that is being exposed right there? It's like any man who says that, you're literally exposing the fact that you agree that dominating and subjugating other people is winning. So going in and destroying other countries and like trying to make yourself superior to them and basically abusing other people, that makes you feel like you're winning. And women are losing because we are not engaging in that behavior on average. It's like, dude, do you even hear what you're saying? You're basically saying that because you're not a monster and because you don't want to be the next Hitler, that basically you haven't truly taken on the same behaviors as men. And also, why is it that masculinity, or having these traditional, basically toxic masculine traits, that's the only way to be a leader? Why can't there be other leadership styles? So do you see what I mean about how some men, they have this monolithic point of view? Basically, if you don't act masculine, if you don't act domineering, if you don't try to subjugate others, then you're losing. So women are losing because they're not dominating like how men are. And it's like, hello, maybe we don't want to dominate other people. Maybe we just want to enjoy our lives and mind our own business. And another argument that I heard is that men are the stronger sex, and that's why like everything that we use is created by men. All the buildings we're in are created by men. Okay, so since you're so strong, you should have no problem with us decentering you, right? Because you're strong. You're strong on your own. You can build your own infrastructures. You can do your own thing, right? You guys know how to build buildings. You know how to create all of these inventions, but suddenly you don't know how to live without a woman? I thought you guys are the stronger sex. I thought you guys are the superior sex. Another talking point that I heard against the exotical space is that basically, if you decenter men, you're not going to have an exciting life, because men are supposedly what provides all of this excitement and all of this fun. So, like, without men, it's going to be boring. And it's like, first of all, like I said, decentering is different than female separatism. Okay. So, decentering men doesn't mean that you're banned from talking to them, you're banned from interacting with them. No, that's female separatism. This space, the exotical space, is actually a very inclusive space. So, I actually don't shame. I don't care whether you're a trad wife, hypergamous, divestment, swirling, whatever it is. I don't necessarily think one is better than the other because all of them have their flaws. But to say that a woman's life is not going to be exciting without a man, that just shows the codependent nature of the man who's saying that, because he's essentially admitting that he actually needs another person in his life in order for it to have any excitement. So you're telling me that with all of the beautiful places I can travel to in this world, with all of the amazing things that I can do with my gifts and talents, like helping other women, creating all of these YouTube videos, using my creativity to make content that I love, you're telling me that all of that pales in comparison to interacting with Joe Blow from down the street? Do you see how monolithic that mindset is? Oh, well, your life is not going to be exciting without a man anyway. And like I said, women can still have excitement with men without centering her life around that man or centering her life and happiness around him. She can still go on a vacation with a man, and then once the vacation is over, they both go back home. Or they can date, and then once the relationship ends, they both go back home. They both move on with their lives. As opposed to, oh no, I have to do everything in my power to keep this man, and I have to try to shape and mold myself to be what he wants me to be in order for me to be happy. No, that's called emotional codependency. Male-centered, whenever I use that phrase like so-and-so is male-centered, what I mean is they are codependent on men in some way. So all I'm talking about on this channel is ending that cycle of codependency. Another comment I heard was, how can you decenter men when you rely on their protection provision and problem solving? It's like, okay, you're protecting us from yourselves. You are providing for yourselves, or you are providing for your countries that you rule over by dominating and subjugating others, and then you problem solve the problems that you create. So it kind of evens out. Like, there is no such thing as, oh, women are just, we have to depend on men, otherwise we can't solve any problems on our own, and women can't protect themselves, women can't provide for themselves. It's like, no, just because some men may do those things, it doesn't mean that women are incapable. So once again, do you hear the internalized misogyny in that talking point? Oh, without men, you can't protect anything, you can't provide anything, and you can't solve any problems. That's false. Like, I'm sure there have been female societies throughout history who have been able to protect themselves, provide for themselves, and problem solve within their own communities. Another thing that some men are saying about the decentering men movement is that this whole thing is just rooted in our emotions. Okay, well, my emotions are valid. I have the right to acknowledge my emotions. I have the right to make decisions based on my emotional health. Anything that promotes emotional health is very important to me. Okay, so if it makes me feel more emotionally healthy to decenter men, that's what I am going to do. And also, to imply that centering a man is going to increase my emotional health, that is one of the dumbest talking points I've ever heard in my life. Oh, well, you need to be more male-centered. That's how you're going to be emotionally healthy. That doesn't even make sense. And do you see what I mean about how a lot of men, they devalue emotions. They devalue your emotional health as a woman. And so they'll say things like, oh, you're just acting based on emotions, as if your emotions are dumb as a woman. And it's like, no, we all know that the body keeps the score. So if you've read that book, you know that like your emotions, and emotion just means energy and motion. So you know that your emotions, the energy in your body and how your body is reacting, it's literally trying to protect you in a lot of cases. That's your body trying to tell you, hey, I don't like being alone at night with this random guy who's drunk. I don't like how I feel. Like, your feelings and emotions can actually serve as a protection mechanism to try to help you to get away from trauma. So, like, if somebody is taking away my peace, you know how they say, oh, a woman should be your peace? Yeah, that's because he doesn't have any inner peace. He doesn't know how to be peaceful on his own. That's why he needs you as a woman with your emotional ass to come in and be his peace, because he is out of tune with his emotions, which tells me that he's most likely emotionally unhealthy. And so that's why they say things like, oh, well, you're just acting on emotions, as if emotions are worthless and dumb and shouldn't be prioritized. So if us decentering men is just us being emotional, well, then go find a woman who is not emotional. Go find a woman who is a sociopath. Because, by the way, one of the symptoms of being mentally ill is having a lack of emotions, like having no emotions at all. That is actually a symptom of mental illness. So by shaming people for feeling emotions, you're actually promoting mental illness. You're actually promoting narcissism. A lot of narcissists, they don't feel remorse. There are a whole bunch of emotions that a lot of narcissists don't feel. So by saying it like it's bad to feel emotions, you're literally promoting narcissism. Another talking point that I heard is decentering men is a road to nowhere. And my response is, okay, well then give me some examples of where centering men is a road to everything. Please give me some examples. Name examples of women who are male-centered and they succeeded in life. Point fingers and name names. Who is she? I would love to meet her. I would love to see some documentaries about her. Name those women who have centered men and they are happy in life. Who is it? Who are these imaginary women? Is it the trad wives? Because if it's the trad wives, why don't I see any trad wives above the age of 55? Why don't I see trad wives who are overweight? Why don't I see trad wives who are disabled? So please tell me the solution then. Because if the solution is being male-centered, why are there no examples being held up in the air of women being male-centered and their lives turn out great? I don't see those examples, because even if you look throughout history, if you look at a lot of, we can look back at the 1950s. I don't see that being the solution. I don't believe that that was the happiest time for women, because a lot of the women came out later on and said that was a horrible time. There are a lot of articles that talk about how a lot of women back then were on antidepressants and stuff like that. And I certainly don't think that the 1800s was a good time, if you want to use being male-centered as an example, because the 1800s is when slavery was happening. A lot of women were being R-worded. So if decentering men is not the solution, please tell me what the solution is and offer multiple examples of how that solution works and give me proof that being male-centered is the solution. I'll wait. Because I don't see any men holding up examples of, oh, this is the perfect woman, or this is the perfect relationship, this is how it should be. Because the last time I checked, the only examples that men can give are 50-50 relationships. And I can tell you as a woman that a lot of the women I know that have been in 50-50 relationships, that does not make them happy. It doesn't work. But then again, you guys deprioritize emotions. So why should I listen to a man who literally admits that my emotions are unimportant? And then on top of that, those men cannot give examples of being male-centered working out for any woman long term. So I have no examples from the divestors. I have no examples from the traditional men, or whatever, red pill men, whatever these men are calling themselves, alpha males. So it's like, yeah, I have smoke for the divestors. I have smoke for the black community, but I also have smoke for the men as well. Men cannot provide any good examples of women being male-centered and it actually working out. And so until I see those stats and until I see the articles that say that women in relationships or marriages are the happiest subgroup on earth, I'm going to continue to make my decentering men content. And another thing that I heard is like, oh, decentering men, that's just being in the wilderness. You're just going to be led into the wilderness. Okay, well, centering men is not going to lead me into the land of milk and honey. Because you see how that ended up for a lot of women who are so desperate. Look at pick-me women. Pick-me women are extremely male-centered. Look at how all of them turn out. Look at how they turn out as a majority, whether she's black, white, fat, skinny, old, young. Look at how a lot of those women turn out. Even if you look at the trad wives, as soon as that man leaves her for a younger woman or whatever, then what? Then she has a 10-year gap on her resume. Look at all of those Mormon women on TikTok who talked about how basically their ability to feed their children was based on whether or not the husband found the wife sexy. So people talk about the exotical space being vain and, oh, we're so vain because we talk about pretty privilege. Well, try being male-centered. because they make the argument that, oh, well, men are just visual creatures. So I don't see it working out while being male centered. So where are the examples? Where are the examples of women basing their lives around men and it worked out well? Where are the examples of women being codependent on men and it worked out well? I don't see any examples. They never point fingers and name names. So this is why I don't take a lot of the male content creators seriously, because they don't have any good examples of marriages or relationships, boyfriend, girlfriend, or even societies or even historical evidence to point to the fact that centering men is healthy. And so because I do not see that evidence, I have no choice but to go my own way and do what works best for me. And another talking point I heard is like, oh, if women really wanted power, they would have to like unify and come against men. Okay, decentering men, this is not about us trying to have power over men. So do you see how they see this movement as like, oh my God, you guys are trying to like have more power than us. No, everybody doesn't want to dominate you, Scott. Everybody doesn't want to dominate you, Tyrone. Decentering men is actually not about power. It's really about peace more than anything else. And if it is about power, it's more so about personal power rather than trying to play power games with a man. Because what do we need to dominate men for? Like, seriously, I don't have a desire to dominate Scott, who works at my job. Like, I don't have a desire to dominate Jorge or to dominate Roberto. I don't care what's going on with them. I just want my own peace. And so that's why I've learned to focus on and prioritize my own mental and emotional health. That is what I mean when I talk about decentering men on this channel. And so the fact that men are taking it as, oh, we're trying to play power games with them and, we're just trying to show that we're more powerful than them. Everything is not a competition. Everything is not a mental manipulation mind game. Everything is not an egotistical show of narcissism. Another argument that I heard is that sex workers center men and like basically women's sexual value has gone down. Okay, well, if we've all hit the wall or whatever, or if women's value has gone down, or if women have basically if we're just worthless in that area, then you shouldn't care about us decentering you. You should actually be celebrating us decentering men. You should be happy, like, oh yes, I don't have to deal with any women anymore because all of their value has gone down anyway. So if all of our value is low, if we are just a bunch of low value women who are decentering men, then why do you care about us decentering you? Shouldn't you be happy? And another argument that I heard is that basically women want men more than men want women. Like women are more desperate for men. This is completely false. Not only is this statistically false, but it doesn't even make sense because men are more likely to R-word and SA women because that's how desperate a lot of men are for, gratifying their sexual desires, not to mention hormones playing in favor of women rather than being in favor of men, because men's hormones cycle, I believe, every 24 hours, whereas women's hormones do a cycle about every 30 days. So men actually, on average, want women way more than women want men. So the only women who are probably just as desperate, if not more desperate, would be the types of women I'm talking about, which is really the quote-unquote femcells, or basically like pick-me's who didn't get picked. But that's really just a small subcategory of women. I don't think that those women actually represent the majority. I talk about this all the time. The divestors and stuff like that, they don't represent the majority of women. Those are just small subsections of women who are just exceptionally desperate. And I believe that those types of women tend to have a lot of mental illnesses and codependency. And then another argument that I heard is that men have actually decentered women. Okay, so then aren't we just evening the playing field then? So again, why would you be mad if we are simply following suit and doing the same thing as you? So if you have decentered us, why should we center you? Do you see what I mean? Do you see the narcissism? So I decentered women, but I'm mad that women are decentering men. So basically, I don't want you, but I don't want you to not want me. Do you see the extreme hypocrisy? Anyway, what do you ladies think? Do you think that men are intimidated that we are decentering them? Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.